So I want to talk about Mabon and Autumn briefly. This year, it's Saturday, the 23rd, I think, 2023. And I was watching a video on Center for Shamanism by a Celtic shaman. I forget her name, Rhonda, I think. I share her stuff in my story on Instagram quite often. But she kind of sets the record straight as to what rituals and celebrations are ancient, and the calendar when things were celebrated back then, because we've kind of turned everything into being around our current Gregorian calendar, which isn't necessarily accurate. I feel more comfortable. Energetically speaking, I feel changes. I'm really in sync with the calendar they used back then. So, and I've shared the name of that calendar before on my Instagram. I'm drawing a blank on it right now. But I want to talk about Mabon because this year, 2023, it's on Saturday, the 23rd. And it's kind of a beginning of autumn sort of a celebration because that is the autumn equinox as well. And I learned today that it was not an ancient Celtic celebration, but it's something that is a little more recent as the 1970s it started. And it got me to thinking about, and she has a great brief video on her Instagram. I shared it in my story, Miss Micah Instagram, if you want to check it out. But I think that I want to talk about how we are collectively changing. And I have a couple theories. These are all just my theories on life experience because I grew up in the 80s, 90s, early 90s, late 80s are what I remember the most because I was a 70s baby. And I feel like we celebrate autumn in general, autumn, the Burr months, more now than we did when I was younger. And I have a few ideas about why that is. Social media obviously is one. I think maybe after COVID, people became a lot more attuned to the other realms. Amy Bruni on her Haunted Road podcast, and maybe in her book too, I read, talks about how her theory was that when we were on lockdown, we were still and became more aware of anomalies and things that were happening around us because we're so busy and active all the time. We're living in a very extroverted world, and we were before COVID, but COVID, that stillness kind of amplified how extroverted everything is. And I think that it was building up to that point anyway, to where people were wanting to tap into their own intrinsic power. What is my energy? Where is my frequency? How do I connect? How am I in tune to nature, to the rhythms of the earth, to the planets shifting, the moon, all of that? Where do I fit into this? And how can I use it to my advantage? And I feel like, because we can get down another rabbit hole, I studied traditional Chinese medicine in the yin and yang, which it doesn't mean good and bad because there's light and shadow in both. But what it does mean is masculine and feminine. Masculine is more extroverted, external world, and the feminine energy, and this is energy we're talking about, not gender, kind of like electrical output and input. You know, when you're plugging in a plug, the male end is what's going inside the outlet, and the outlet is the female end that's receiving. But the male can't function. I got an itch, sorry, my allergies are terrible. But it can't function, they can't function without each other. Like they're kind of, and that's the laws of the universe. And people tend to oversimplify it by humanizing it more than they should in gender roles. And I'm not going to go down that road either because it's moot in this topic. It's relevant in other topics, but a whole nother can of worms that I'm not going to get into. I want to talk about the happiness. And I think that we have started our own rituals for our future ancestors, right? I think Mabon is exciting. And, when Rhonda talked about it in her, I think her name is Rhonda, I hope I'm right, in her video, and she's like, you do you. Some people really want to stay attached to the ancestral stuff, and I relate to that also. I think that upholding that integrity is important, but I also think that our ancestors didn't live in this time period that is extremely loud. We're all overstimulated. It's a very extroverted, masculine energy. Let's not even get into the patriarchy of how the world is set up, but just the masculine energy of the noise, the constant noise. We're bombarded with noise. We're using our devices 35 to 40% more than we did before COVID. And that's was 3 years ago. And it's grown that much. So we're being bombarded constantly. And there's something beautiful about going within, and something about the Ber months gives us permission collectively to be quiet, to be still. The earth in the northern hemisphere is quieter and it's more still because the sun isn't out as long. The days are getting shorter as we get closer to the autumn equinox. And it just allows us to be still and to get to know ourselves and tap into our power and kind of regenerate. It's almost like we've also lost the power of convalescing. When you've been sick, we're so pushed to get back to work. We're not supported with maternity or paternity leave when a baby is born. We don't have the kind of healthcare system or support where we work to take enough time off that we might need for our mental or physical or even spiritual health. And so sometimes holidays, all the things that are going to happen when the days start getting shorter, give us permission to go within and explore our shadows, which is another topic I can talk about another time. But our shadow self is that unrecognized source of our power, something that we were shamed for or put down for when we were young, and we buried it. And I've heard some podcasts, it's infuriating, people who do shadow coaching that are not trauma informed. If you ever get any kind of shadow coaching, can I just ask you to please find any practitioner that's trauma informed? Because I listened to one practitioner who does shadow work with clients, and she told people to name their shadow, almost from the context of you're ashamed of that. And this is so problematic in so many ways, and I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but shadow work is related to autumn, to yin energy. It is where the source of feminine power, and we all have feminine power because we all have feminine energy and masculine energy within us, period, gender aside. And the problem with naming something that's part of you, it might show up in a way that appears negative, quote unquote, but really that's a source of your power. And when you name it, you're almost disassociating yourself more. It perpetuates disassociation. It can compound complex trauma if somebody had it. And it can also add to the shame. You can't call yourself, this is an aspect, because with me, my shadow self, anything that I bury is little Micah. Little Micah was scared, so she may have overreacted in this manner because she needed this. So how can little Micah get that without hurting other people? How can she feel that? What does she need? And then I'm hearing myself. I'm connecting with the little self that wanted to protect me to begin with, wanted me to feel what I needed to feel in whatever moment. And then it just came out inappropriately because, you're in your fight, flight, or freeze, especially as a child, because that's the first part of your brain that's developed. So that's some food for thought. What are your thoughts? I'd love to know them.